Welcome to Parallax, the resurrection of truth, beauty, and goodness. Parallax.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. My name is David. I work with Claire Molinard, who has co-founded the Unique Self Institute with Dr. Marc Gafni, and I'm just privileged to be introducing Marc today. So in 2012, Dr. Marc Gafni wrote this pioneering book called Your Unique Self, The Radical Path to Personal Enlightenment, which brilliantly weaves together the insights of all the great traditions, modern science, and postmodern thought into an elegant, concise articulation of what it means to be human. And it's truly an evolution of love. It's an evolution of what it means to know who we are. And it's a new worldview that's capable of transforming humanity and responding to breakdown with a breakthrough, from crisis to crossing, as Dr. Marc often calls it, and to really create a new civilization that is able to get through these challenges that we're living in. Marc lives his teaching, and he really holds it in an evolutionary context. And he holds us, anyone who studies with him, in our evolutionary unique selves. And it's really not just about principles, it's also about living them. And so I'm just grateful that I've been able to be participating with him in this. Now, many of you who know, especially if you're on One Mountain, you know that Marc has a brilliant mind able to synthesize across so many domains, profound wisdom, and just broadly. And he also has a deep heart and able to really open it over and over again with the people that he works with and cares for every day. And personally, unique self-teaching has opened up for me a life of so much more aliveness and purpose and meaning. And so Claire and I are just so thrilled to be able to do this next iteration with Andrew of Unique Self 2.0, which is living what we're talking about. It's an evolving Dharma, it's an evolving teaching. And so this 2.0 podcast series and course is really about what is next that wasn't in the original Unique Self book, but needs to be added, and kind of the evolving wisdom that's coming out of it. So I'm thrilled to be here with you. We're thrilled to be here with you, and may we all open our minds and hearts to be at the cutting edge together. So thank you all, and I welcome Dr. Marc Gafni.
Thank you. And perhaps I would just say that to add to that is I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I haven't talked to Dr. Marc in this vein for some time. Often we're promoting courses and stuff, things like that. I want to, and that's always very deep as well, but I want to have a nice, long, deep conversation here. If Marc is still on fire, as apparently you were very on fire at the One Mountain, so hopefully you're still on fire and you'll continue to be on fire, and we can go into this very deeply, Dr. Marc.
Little tiny tender flame. So I'm thrilled to be with you, Andrew, and David. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. So let's dive just to say and Andrew, you'll lead us, but just to say, so the unique, we're about to do the second series with beloved Andrew at Parallax. We did the first 3-part series, which was fantastic, right? And what we're trying to do, as David said so elegantly, is between 2011 and 2025, today, in those 14 years, the unique self teaching, understanding, unique self theory, unique self enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, has gone through massive iterations, and none of them have really been recorded, right? So there needs kind of to be volume 2 of unique self. And Claire and David are going to kind of take the notes, from what we do in these unique self, 3-week courses. And I'm borrowing from my dear friend, Sally Kempton, right? This idea of a kind of a 3-week course where we do kind of one focused topic. So this is going to be the second 3-week course, right, Andrew? And it's starting, I believe, in 2 weeks. Is it something like that? March what? When is it start?
March 9th, Sunday, March 9th. Yeah,
Sunday, March 9th. And the other major thing of occasion is that Andrew clearly got new glasses like mine, which we're like the guys with the black glasses. So we got the guys with the black glasses going on here, right?
Yeah. We're
Right.
mimetic creatures. We copy each other. That's how
We totally. So we totally got a gun on. We're thinking of getting a pair for Sabri, and we'll be good. Okay. So we got the black glasses. Take it away, Andrew. Where are we going? Take us
Okay,
inside.
so the title of the course is Unique Self 2.0, Portal 2, Beyond Maslow, a new hierarchy of needs. And the question I wanted to just begin with, right, and which might be a bit of a review, just for our listeners, and
Well,
also
hold
because
on, Andrew, 1 second. Oots, I haven't seen Oots in such a long time. It's good to see you, brother. Yes, great to see you, man. Yeah, you made my day. Rock star. Yes, I apologize. Yes.
no worries. Okay, so I was just saying that the question I want to ask, in terms of unique self, and we can get perhaps into unique self 2.0 afterwards, is, as somebody, who practices in the Eastern traditions, there's this notion of no self, which is big in Zen and Advaita and all over the place. And it's something I've been struggling with, their notion of no self and your notion of unique self. So how do we bring these two worlds together? That's my first question.
That's great. No, that's great. Andrew, it's great to see you, man. Right. It's great to see you. I mean, it's always great to be with Andrew, and I've missed our conversations, and I'm actually excited. We did an entire set of talks on the tree of life, kind of these 10 values. And I'm excited to do a second set of talks on anti-value, the anti-tree of life, right? Which is where kind of I'm deep in thinking about that these days. So I'm excited about that. So let's step in. And we have till about 3:00, everyone, right? So we got till about 3:00. So we're about 45 minutes. So let's see if we can step in. So Andrew, if I can, with permission, if I can just repeat, your inquiry is how do you bring a no self and unique self together? I mean, let's focus just on that today. And if we just go back and forth, if we could just clarify that, right? As the Bible says, fuck, we're in good shape. And that's a direct quote, by the way. Right. So can I tell you a little story? Is that okay? Right. And I'm not, and again, I apologize. I'm not quite, as Sally used to say, Sally Kempton, I'm not quite banging on all eights, right? Meaning, when you're sick, like the synapses, and whoever was in one mountain probably noticed that for about 5 or 6 minutes, I'm like, where are we? What are we talking about? So I want to just kind of drop in and go slow. Okay. But I'm going to tell you a great story. So there's a guy who passed away a few years ago. He was a great guy, named Jumpo Roshi, right? He was a fairly well-known, kind of Zen, master teacher. And he was a wild man. I think he was kind of part of a certain moment of the 60s. I think he did prison time for kind of some selling drugs or something someplace along the way. But it was kind of part of his hardcore persona, kind of hardcore practitioner, kind of hardcore realizer, kind of serious, badass, Zen motherfucker, kind of blood on the ground, Jumpo Roshi, right? And Jumpo was very, very committed to no self, or some version of no self. He called it Mondo Zen, but it was, some version of the core no self teaching, was very, very clear to him. And this is what I'm about to tell you, by the way, is recorded. I believe it's on our website, so I am not making this up. I believe there's a recording of it. And so we finally did, we had just published the Unique Self book, and we finally were going to have our kind of big, showdown. For those of you who are familiar with the old American West, it's like the showdown at OK Corral, right? There we are in Tombstone, right? And we got
Dharma combat, right? And Zen, they call it Dharma combat.
Dharma combat. And we got, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and Morgan Earp and Jim, on the other side, you got Billy Claiborne. Who remembers this, right? Billy Claiborne and what were the name of those the ranchers? I can't remember their names, but anyways, you got the idea. Okay, so we got the OK Corral showdown is going to happen, and he expects this kind of. And I had no idea what to talk about, but he expects this, this series of kind of precise, kind of we're going to blow away no self. And I said to him, and I remember like Goddess kind of took over as Goddess, does, and I said, okay, I have clear, irrefutable right, unimpeachable evidence for unique self. It's not just no self, it's unique self, that it's two words. I'm going to give you a direct transmission of it, and you will know it. So it looks at me like I'm crazy, right? Which, you know, I mean, let's not go into that debate now, but who knows? But it's kind of like whatever, like yawning Mr. kind of badass Jumpa Roshi, who's a beautiful man, by the way, is a just fantastic human being. And so now it gets very quiet. I said, "You ready?" He said, "I'm ready." So everyone's kind of, we're waiting. I said, "Here it is. Jumpa Roshi." That was it. And he looked at me. He said, "Oh my God, you're right." That's a very big deal. It's a very big deal. In other words, Jumpa Roshi is not just no self. The guy was all badass personhood of this very unique quality, this very unique texture, right? This very unique taste. And what I was saying to him is that this Jumpa Roshiness is not just the social, psychological, and cultural conditioning that happened to form this dude who kind of wound up selling some drugs and going to prison and, you know, kind of talking about monogamy and public. It wasn't just, no. There's this quality in Cosmos, which is called Jumpa Roshiness, right? Which was intended by all that is, right? And it is an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence and love beauty, right? Of all that is, that's living in, as, and through Jumpa Roshi, that never was, is, or will be ever again. And Jumpa Roshi himself, in his irreducible, gorgeous, stunning texture of uniqueness, right, is evidence of unique self. Now you understand, right? And again, I didn't intend to do it this way. This was not a kind of planned strategic attack on the citadels of Zen, right? But of course, there's nothing he could say, because to say anything would have been to deny himself. And he was just, if you had to know Jumpo, David, did you ever meet Jumpo back in the day? Right? You were aware of him kind of vaguely around the scene, right? I don't know who ever met him, but in other words, there's nothing you can't deny yourself. Now, here's part two, and then back to you, Andrew. And if you do deny yourself, you're dead. So that's the problem. The problem is that, see, if you just make no self about the jettisoning, the freeing of, I'm just asking anyone who can, if you just can, just mute for a second. Whoever hasn't muted, just don't mute your soul, but just the button, okay? Right, so the way people teach no self is, oh, get rid of all that monkey mind, right? So for example, right, you know, your friend Hanley, Terry, right, in LifeSpring, let's get rid of all that chatter, get rid of that victim consciousness. That's good stuff. You should do that. That's good. That's good, right? And, you know, and my friend Werner Erhard, who kind of created this whole landmark forum, built the landmark forum on that kind of Zen realization of, you know, where's the cheese, right? You know, you got this winning formulas. They're not really who you are, right? It's not working, right? And by Saturday afternoon of kind of the basic landmark forum event, you get to this place where you empty yourself out and you experience, right, that you're in the field, and then you recreate yourself anew. That's so there's deep truth to all of that. But you can't create yourself as just anything. If I did a practice of no self, I do no self practices all the time, right? For example, I talked to KK, who's sitting in the room. She says, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. I say, okay, no self, right? Not a problem, no self. Load the dishwasher that way, no self, not a problem. You didn't make the bed, not a problem, no self. It's like, you know, I'm a major no self practitioner here, big time, right? No, right? You didn't do the checkbook, no self, right? You gotta use no self, right? The best you can, right? But here's the thing: I could do all the no self in the world, right? And Gail, I will never come out as Andrew Sweeney. I will never have the beauty of Andrew Sweeney. I will never have his texture, his eros. I'll never sing the way he does. I'll never have the quality of his yearning. I'll never have kind of the beauty of his voice. I'll never have the texture, right, of Andrew Sweeney-ness. No matter what I do, I can do all the no self in the world. I'll never be Andrew Sweeney. I'm never going to get that beauty. It's not available to me, because that beauty, Cosmos intended through Andrew Sweeney, which is why I get to fall in love with him, because I'm not trying to be him. And I don't need to hijack him. I don't need to be jealous about how he kind of takes out that guitar and kind of does that sexy Leonard Cohen thing, and and people are swooning all over the streets. I can deal with it. That's his thing, right? But you get that it's deep, it's profound, it's beautiful, right? In other words, if you don't actually get unique self, you have polarization and jealousy, which was, by the way, no one tells you this, but the fucking Zen monasteries in Japan were mostly armed garrisons available for hire, fighting each other. No one tells you that story, right? And as we have the sense of these beautiful, pristine, Zen monks kind of sitting around, and that's not what happened. There were armed garrisons, lots of kamikaze pilots, by the way, right? You can't, now it's not, Zen's beautiful. Zen's stunning. Zen's one of the most stunning, articulations of the human mind and spirit, but it's only holding one dimension. And that dimension is, there is a field, true self. I like the word better than no self, which is there's a truth of me, which is the second reason Andrew and I can love each other. It's not only because I see his unique distinction that I get to fall in love with, because love's a unique self-perception, but actually Andrew and I are already the same person. That's also true. So we can, right? In other words, he's not separate from me. We can feel each other. We're in the same field of Eros. There's a prior unity. There's a prior field that we both emerge out of. We both emerge out of the field of true self, which is the field of value. And then we're each unique incarnations, distinctions of intimate value. So we both are true self together. And that's what we mean when we say the total number of true selves in the world is one, right? So me and Dominique, my new friend here, good to see you, brother. Welcome, right? So we're both in the field of true self together. There's no difference between us at all. None, right? Which is why, so there's two things we need to fall in love. That's the crazy thing, isn't it? In order to fall in love we need both true self and unique self. You cannot fall in love based on just separate self. Separate self falling in love doesn't work. That's why people kill each other. That's why therapy, it can give you some life hacks, give you some communication skills, but basically most of psychology is separate self therapy, trying to convince you that you're in love when you're not. And then you feel guilty about not being in love, and then it gets even worse, right? It's downhill spiral. It doesn't work. Separate selves can't love each other. Not for real.
Mark, can I kind of
take it away, sir? It's all yours.
Just be a little bit of a devil's advocate here and defend the Zen Mu, which the no self, and just as a devil's advocate, there's different things I've heard in Zen. For example, when Zen people get together, there are you put a bunch of potatoes in a pot or rocks together, and then the unique self develops out of the friction between all the people working together, and something unique arises. And also the Zen phrase, first there are mountains and rivers, then there are not mountains and rivers, and then there are mountains and rivers again. So there are mountains and rivers again, right? Which means that the unique self reemerges after the false self is destroyed in that sort of practice environment. So anyway, that just was coming to my mind here. Yeah.
No, beautiful. So you said, brother, that's great. Let's say you said two different things. Okay. So I want to disambiguate between them. And mostly because I wanted to use the word disambiguate, which is always an opportunity that a human being shouldn't easily pass up, obviously. Right. So, but you said two distinct things. So let's look at each of them, my friend. Okay. So the first thing you said was about the emergence of collective intelligence from between the selves. So that's a different, I want to put that aside.
No, sir. No, the emergence of unique expression within the friction of all the different selves coming together, not a collective intelligence. That's not what I was talking about.
So let me get back to what that means in a second. Let me take the second one. We'll go to the first one. Okay. So the Zen saying, of which there's multiple versions of, I call that, I just finished an essay, which Tali here is actually artistically creating. I call that She Comes in Threes. That's a version of what we call She Comes in Threes. And She Comes in Threes means, there's mountains and rivers, then there's no mountains and rivers. Station 1, there's mountains and rivers. Things are as they are. Station 2, things are not as they are at all, right? There's no mountains and rivers. right? Station 2, and excuse me, and then station 3, mountains and rivers, right?
No. It's mountains and rivers as the second one. It's not the same as the first. It doesn't come back to the beginning. It's mountains and rivers and exclamation mark at the end.
No, I understand. So now I got you. So the first station is mountains and rivers. The second station is, or there's another way to say it is, the first station is chop wood, carry water, or the second station is no chop wood, carry water, or no mountains and rivers. The third one is mountain rivers again, but at there's a different quality to the mountains and rivers in the third than there is in the first. So the
which
first
is love, right? Which is what you're talking about.
Let's go slow. Let's go. So let's see what it is. Let's see what it is, because there could be love also in the first station. But it's a different quality of love.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go slow for a second. So the question is, right, that triplicate in Zen, that Zen application of this notion that I'm calling trialectics. There's a trialectical pattern of cosmos. And in other words, in a certain sense, here's how we could say it, bro. Let's go slow. There's a macro pattern in cosmos called the evolution of love. That macro pattern advances based on a micro sequence. And the micro sequence is she comes in threes. So she comes in threes is the micro sequence of the evolution of love, meaning there's love at station 1, but then there's even more love at station 2, and there's even more love at station 3. And love means, I want to go slow here. This is all new. So love means I'm knowing more and more. To love is to know. Love and knowledge are deeply, intimately related. So love is gnosis. Adam knew his wife Eve. Love is eros. Knowledge is carnal. It's carnal knowledge. To love is to know, and to know is to love. So I'm going to go slow. So at station 1, I know reality. I love reality, mountains and rivers. At station 2, I disabuse myself of the illusion of a kind of fixed object material world, right? And I said, no, that's an illusion. That's an illusion, right? That's an illusion, right? I free myself from that illusion, right? At station 3, I reclaim kind of the dignity, right, of reality as it is, right? But it's exclamation point, right? It's actually mountains and rivers. And the question is, what does mountain and rivers mean at the other side? What it means is that there's something about this physical reality which is not ordinary, but it's actually outrageous, right? It's right. And in some sense, the way I would say it is, right, the mountains and rivers are an expression, Zen doesn't say this, but they're an expression of some version of the intimate universe in this dazzling cacophony of interrelated allurement. But that doesn't yet address the issue of unique self and no self, right? Because the way, let me go even slower. Let me put it this way. You could, I delete the last sentence. So now within Zen, that generally is not understood to be unique self. Right? That's not the overwhelming readings of Zen don't actually point towards unique self. However, you're absolutely correct that there is a strain, a way of reading Zen teaching, a way of reading also CosmoErotic teaching, right? To actually understand this third station as being unique self, that the Zen masters don't classically talk about. But if you actually, go slow with me, if you actually.
But here I have
give me one more sec. Let me just play it out, and then it's all yours. Okay, is that okay? Then you got all the rest of the time. I'll be quiet, but I want to play it out so we can see it. So one deep realization of unique self, which is, I think, the best reading of Zen, not the way it's usually read, but the best reading of Zen is something like as follows, okay? Here's unique self. Ready? The flower is red. Unique self. Right? Meaning redness is a quality of reality, which is irreducible and unique. It is as it is, right? We celebrate it. It's not just lost in the white, right? Of the kind of, the ultimate truth, right? There's these distinct colors, and that color simply is. It's not absorbed in the white, right? The ultimate underlying the spectrum, there's actually that color. So in that sense, right, mountains and rivers exclamation point means the celebration of this distinction of the manifest world And then you'd have to make the extension, stay slow, and say, apply that now to human beings. And that's where it gets right. Now you got to make an extension. You can say, okay, now human beings as unique are as they are, right? But that's not yet quite unique self, right? And there's other texts in Zen that talk about the grain of wood, right? That there's a particular grain of wood in true self, which is, again, pointing towards unique self. And there's another text, which is obviously in pictorial form, which is the 10th ox-herding picture in Buddhism, right? In which, in Zen, where I turn towards the marketplace, which is also kind of a, mountains and rivers, exclamation point. So there's an intimation of unique self.
What about the one true man or the one true woman?
Right. So again, the one true man and the one true woman, right? So there's two, let me see if I can, let me just see if I can find something for you. Hold on one second. I'm going to read you something for a second. Hold on. Where is that? No, it's upstairs. Okay. So there's a, no, that's okay. There's a, there's an idea, right, of this hyperhuman, right, this Übermensch, right, but the Übermensch exists all across literature, and the hyperhuman is, right, the human being, right, who God moves through. So this ultimate man, ultimate human, is not necessarily unique, right? It's right. They might have cults. Zen might say, which is the way Wilbur interpreted it for years, the way Rupert Spira interprets it. I'm saying, right, and it's the way all the contemporary teachers of Zen, right, and it's interpreted it that way. Genpo Roshi interpreted it that way, right? When I met him, right, and I actually sat with him, and we talked about this deeply. And at a certain point, he got unique self, and then he put a chapter on unique self in his book, Big Mind. Right? But that was a big revolution. That was a big revolution to get, right? In other words, when Muktananda, who's from the Siddha Yoga tradition in CosmoErotic Shaivism, used to say to his students, God appears in you as you. So the assumption of all of his students was that was true self. And what I said to many of those students at a certain moment, Sally Kempton and I, who's a key student of Muktananda's, had many, Swami Durgananda, she was called, had many conversations on this. I said, no, God appears in you as you is not true self, is unique self, right? But that's a leap, right? That's not what Zen is classically saying. It's not how Zen was understood. It's not how Zen was taught, right? But you're absolutely correct in saying that there is, and that's how religions evolve. There's an intimation, there's a fragrance, there's a tonality in certain Zen texts which open up towards unique self. And in fact, that allowed Dennis Merzel, Genpo Roshi, in his book, Big Mind, the way he framed it was, after we talked about this, and I gave a talk on unique self to like 50 people in 2006, and then I was, and we sat and had lunch together at a restaurant in Salt Lake, and he said, I borrowed unique self from you, and that actually changed the game. And what he did is he had in his triangle, he's got small self, and then he's got big mind, kind of expanded self or true self. And then at his apex, he has unique self. But that was after meeting the idea of unique self in 2006, right? And then he kind of transposed and reworked the Zen teaching, which is what should happen. Right? That's what should happen. So there's intimation of unique self in Zen, but it's not what the core of the teaching is. But where Zen is crazy helpful is, and then it's completely back to you. Where Zen is crazy helpful is, right, or mystical true self is helpful is, it prevents unique self from being hijacked as just another glorified form of separate self. Right? It's very easier for people not to get unique self. It's very easy for unique self to be just about my individuation, about my talent, about my gift, right? And I can't tell you the amount of people over the years who've tried to hijack unique self into some sort of glorified form of my, my talent, my kind of my gift. And yes, but that's not what unique self is. Unique self requires first a radical true self or no self, right? And in a certain sense, it's in some of the Solomonic lineage sources that point towards unique self, it's too easy to gloss over and actually hijack the unique self teaching for a separate self. And for example, my friend Swami Chaitanananda, right, who was Rudi's successor, Rudrananda, who was, for example, Adida's teacher, right? So Swami, right? My friend Swami, who just texted me a little while ago, we write little Rabbi Swami love notes, right? So he just like refused to teach unique self. He said, because everyone's just going to adopt it into separate self. And it's, right. I won't teach. And I said, it's fine. It's just what you're teaching is not the truth then. Right. And it's, yes, there's a danger of sex becoming bad pornography, but you don't reject sex. Right. And unique self is the nature of reality. But
can I make another point here?
It's all yours. All yours.
So I think in the West, we have this romantic notion of the artist as being a unique self. In a sense, I was having a conversation with somebody about that, and the artists are unique selves for sure, but often artists get lost in this sort of narcissism of their own uniqueness, which is, I don't think it's what you're talking about, because we have to integrate the Zen Mu or the cosmic self or whatever you want to call it before.
Absolutely. So that's a great inquiry. So the artist is holding an intimation of unique self without unique self. So for two reasons. So what the artist understands is that I'm an oman, artist. So the word amen in English, right? Amen, right, means artist, art, oman, right? So amen, I affirm that I am an expression of, or in the field of art of cosmos. Right. At a certain point, I got a little bit, disgusted with teaching. At a certain point, I just thought this teaching is just a horrific thing to do. No one should teach. Right. I had a whole stage like that. And I said, I'm gonna become a spiritual artist. All right. So you can find online all these posts about being, a spiritual artist that I made kind of, in 2006 or 7. So our artist is beautiful. Artist is beautiful. Artist is, I experience the art of reality moving through me. And in that sense, an artist can be very holy, because the artist actually the true artist gets that it's moving through me.
Yeah.
And true art requires a shattering of separate self, right? But all too often, right, the artist doesn't actually hold that, right? They actually hijack, right, the movement of she that's moving through the artist hijacks it for themselves, right? And they don't actually, right, give it over, right, to the field of art, right? The Phantom of the Opera wants what the Phantom of the Opera wants, right? So the music is moving through them, and yet he wants to own she. That's what that's about. It's about the field of the art demanding the ownership of she, right, and refusing to be in devotion. But the quality of the artist is correct. You're absolutely correct. In other words, the unique self quality is, and the way we talk about it in the Dharma, is the unique self is the realization that I am a unique artist, right? In other words, artist is the right description of unique self, and particularly of the pleasure of unique self.
Yeah.
Because there's a unique pleasure in unique self, and there are 6 levels of pleasure. That's a different conversation we haven't had, right? Pleasure is the source of all ethics, and there's 6 levels of pleasure. I don't want to have that conversation now, but pleasure level 5 is the pleasure of unique self. And the way I always describe it, Andrew, right? And so our hearts were yearning for the same and reaching for the same thing, is that the pleasure of unique self is the pleasure of the artist, right? Because there's a unique pleasure. The artist gets this enormous pleasure. So for example, pleasure level 5 is the pleasure of knowing my true nature, which is true self, no self. But the nature of the pleasures is that you'll always give up all of one pleasure to get the next level of pleasure. So you can be in your ashram, right? And you're totally there. You're doing your true self thing. But if you're pulled by your art, you're going to give up the ashram to go to your art, because it's another level of pleasure. It's a different quality of pleasure. So you actually brilliantly, as always, that's exactly right. The pleasure of unique self is actually the pleasure of the artist, right? And our contemporary this is really crazy, right? One of the reasons we idolize art is for that reason. In other words, culture, which has destroyed all the temples, created museums of art. So there's this intuition in culture that there's something about art that's sacred. We actually intuitively relate the sacred and the art because, right, art is about the deeper muses that are beneath and beyond the separate self. But of course, art then gets hijacked as a kind of egoic, structure. So you can't really do art, true art, without true realization. All right. Now you can have contorted art, and you can have beauty, because separate selves can be filled with poignancy and beauty. But the question is, what's the purpose of the art? Is the purpose of the art to evoke identification with the unique moment of pathos or poignancy, right, in the separate self? Or is the purpose of the art to point to that moment in separate self as a portal to something wider, as a portal to something larger, as an opening, right, to a deeper and wider possibility, right? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
That's very great. I'm glad to hear you say that, because, I was having a conversation, and I think people often focus, the reason that artists die young is perhaps that they don't get to that next stage, right? They have this purity of expression, and then rather than focus on the pleasure of art, the suffering comes in.
It's even more than that. Artists believe, I've met this so many times with dear friends who are profound artists. They believe that they can't give up their suffering. There's this deep belief of the artist that if I give up my suffering, I will lose access to the art. Now, stay close. This is so beautiful, right? So there's an intuition there, my brother, that's holy. They're actually recognizing that there's something which is the source of the art, which is not this socialized separate self, right? So they feel in the agony of the suffering, they feel the whispered intimations of the divine field. Why? Because we sense in our suffering that something is discordant, right? We sense in our suffering that there's some violation of intimacy. And it's, I can only suffer if there's an intimate universe and I'm somehow cut out or alienated. I can't, for example, feel abandoned by the mother if there's no mother, right? You know what I mean? And it's, I can't feel contortion if there's not wholeness. I can't feel fragmentation if there's not coherence. So the artist suffers, which means that the artist paradoxically has a much deeper realization of the wholeness, right? In other words, I suffer right? The more bland I am, and the more blind I am, and the more blended I am with everything, right, the less I'm going to suffer. Right? The more I actually sense the field of the intimate universe, right? So then anything that's discordant in the field, right, is kind of troubling in a fundamental way. Right? The more you have an eye for beauty, right, the more something which is out of place, right? I mean, so KK, right, who's sitting right here, KK has an enormous eye for beauty, right? I'm in everything but men, right? But in other words, but but when something's out of place in the house, right, she's like, no, she's got it right, because her aesthetic, I walk by and I'm like, looks fine to me, right? Zach, me and Zach were like, looks okay, right? And KK, no, that's like totally off. Like, how could you even think of like living in a place which has that kind of, aesthetic discordance, right? And I'm like, Zach and I kind of look at each other after KK walks out of the room. We say, okay. And then inevitably, she moves something around and it looks like insanely better. And we're like completely moved by it. And we're like, huh, right? So the more sensitive you are to the field of beauty, the more sensitive you are to a discord in the field, to an ugly in the field. So the artist suffers because the artist actually has intimations of wholeness, echoes of eternity, right? Glimmerings, right, of the sacred. And that's why the artist refuses to give up their suffering. Because what the artist is really saying is not that I need to hold on to my neurosis. All right, let me be neurotic. No, it's that actually neurotic is like, neurotic is like erotic with a new, right? And there's a sense of this wider field. And for the artist, the suffering is the portal to the wider field. And a last example, and I'll give it back to you. But just one more example, if I can, with your permission. I was just talking when was this? When was this? It was just recently, but I was just talking to someone recently, and I was, oh, right. I remember who I was talking to, right? And it was yesterday, and it was a dear friend who's in a life transition, who's just suffering intensely, right? And he was talking about the nature of the suffering. And so I shared with them, I remember in 2006, right, which is kind of like, the worst year ever, right? And I'm in Salt Lake City, and it was like an intense year of unimaginable suffering, just unimaginable. Like every second was just like, shrieking pain. And strangely enough, there are moments when I miss it, right?
I
Because it
understand. Yeah.
was so alive. Everything was shimmering. Everything was so alive. And I remember I walked into the Greek restaurant, which was around the corner from my little apartment. And the person I was meeting, Dan Hamilton, was late. And it was like maybe like my worst day. And this waitress comes over to me, and she sees I'm a little sad. And she looks at me just kind of wide-eyed, just the most pure look, like the goddess herself. And she said, it's going to be all right. Right. And I just burst out in tears. Right. Like in others, like, and I could like feel, and it was like all of her purity, all of the purity of reality was contracting to that particular point in her heart, where she actually, in that simple phrase, literally poured all of the infinite intimacy of cosmos. Right. And a normal day, I wouldn't even have caught it, because I wouldn't have been sensitive to the beauty. Right. So the artist is holding on to their suffering, because the artist is holding on to their suffering, right, as a portal to aliveness, right?
Also, you're aware of, when you're suffering a lot, you're aware of other people's suffering, so you develop compassion. I mean, that's my experience. Is just when I was in a lot of chronic pain, I noticed other people's pain, which I wouldn't notice in a normal situation,
right.
which made me really see what people go through.
So stay with me for a second, okay? No, that's completely true, right? So let's just stay with what you said. So see, the reason the artist holds on to suffering, right, is this aliveness, is this portal, is this capacity to feel other people, as you just described, this empathos, right, where I can actually feel the pathos moving through. But it's also, my friend, because we don't actually have an experience of radical aliveness that comes from joy. You see, very few people, right, actually find their way to a genuine experience of devotion, right? Where actually I'm madly devoted, right, to he, to she, right? I feel the joy of reality pulsing, right, and moving through me. And that's the joy of transfiguration, right? Where I'm transfigured, right? And as we have three ways of knowing. We have in Anthro-Ontology, we say there's common sense. Access common sense lives in me. There's contemplation, which gives me gnosis. And then there's transfiguration. And we talk about this in the Anthro-Ontology. And transfiguration means that I am it and it is me. The intimate universe moves through me. I am the infinite intimate. I am the personal field of the infinite intimate. And not only all the pain, right, but all of the joy of reality is moving through me. And I am quivering devotion. I am trembling realization, right? I am literally kind of rivers and rivulets of rapture, right, alive and blown open, right, and moved, right, to song, right, and to dance. And we generally don't, we have a harder time accessing that aliveness. Now, and if I can, and Andrew, please don't share this, right, I'm about to say, so this is just between us, right, but she gives me access to that, right? So I often, whatever often means, will kind of feel that field opening, and just feel this kind of like, just insane, alive, right, ecstatic joy, right, moving through me. And I don't think I would have survived the pain of the decades without it, right? And for whatever reason, I guess she felt like that guy's such a wreck. I got to give him something, right? And she did, right? And the level of joy, and since we don't have access to it, we try and find it through suffering. So suffering becomes a pseudo-erotic version, right? It's a pseudo-eros, right, of actually the trembling joy of full aliveness, right? When I actually feel, right, the kind of the field of allured reality, the cosmic chemistry, right, alive in me. And we were talking about in One Mountain today that chemistry means there's this movement of allurement that's moving through everything. That's what molecular chemistry is. That's what metabolic chemistry is. When you actually feel that moving through, and the way to imagine it is, right. And again, Andrew, I believe, I think in your practice, right, you're still virginal, so you're not familiar with the arena of sexuality, but there's an arena in sexuality, right, which talks about there's this very pulsating kind of alluring feeling, right, in sexing where you've crossed over a certain line. It's not like, will I, won't I, I'm in, I'm out, you're in, right? So your lower will disappears, and then this higher will takes over. And it's described in the Song of Solomon, Mashcheni acharecha, draw me after you, right? That's the holy seduction, right? Not the unholy seduction, the holy seduction. V'narutz, and then I'm going to run towards you. So you cross a certain line, and then you're in the field of Eros herself, right? Ecstatically trembling. You become divinity in motion, screaming the name of God, right? So that's right? So in sexing, we experience transfiguration. Right? Sexing is, I am CosmoErotic Humanism in person, which is why the ultimate holy of holies, right, is the Kohen, right, the priest who feels Eros moving through them, is transfigured. Right? The holy of holies is an experience of radical transfiguration. Right? So if I don't have any access to that, so my only door is suffering. So I'm not going to give up the suffering for anything. Right. And it's one of the reasons why psychology so often doesn't work, why the recidivism rates, are so insane, because we won't give up our suffering until we're suffering in joy.
So, Marc, this is a good moment to bring in this idea of what we need, the hierarchy of needs, right? Because I think the psychology doesn't address that aspect of the hierarchy of needs, does it?
So we're going to talk about, we're now at actually 2:55, so we have exactly 3 minutes. So I'm not going to, but it's a perfect segue. I'm not going to go into the hierarchy of needs, but what we're going to talk about in this 3-week course is we're going to talk about the raw experience of need. What do I need? And need, just think about the word need for a second, right? Can we just be in the word, everybody, for a second? Everybody okay? Let's just think about the word need, right? So for example, here's like a low-level need. I need KK to be completely moved now to make me tea. So there's just a need, right? It's just a need coming through. I'm just kind of like, I can feel it. And I can feel the movement. Oh my God. Am I there, right? The tea is being lifted, right? It's happening, it's moving, right? So that's just one level of need. Merit, don't try that. It never works. Okay. So right. So there's need. Okay. So that's one, right? But so the more clarified I get, the more my need clarifies. Right. And so I have a need to write a great library. It has nothing.
You know what you need. You really know what you need. Yeah.
Right. You clarify. You should know, what do you need? We need, right? What's the relationship between what I want to call foundational need and aspirational need? We have foundational needs and aspirational needs, right? Which are the very important distinction. And we're going to talk about, Maslow famously articulated in 1943, right, a hierarchy of needs. And I hate anything written in 1943, including my teacher Joseph Soloveitchik's book called Ish Halacha, the Man of Law, because I can never understand why he's sitting in Boston writing the Man of Law in the middle of the Holocaust. So that's a separate problem. But Maslow in 1943 articulates his hierarchy of needs. They've been greatly misread, so there's a kind of organizational literature on Maslow's needs. And then there's what Maslow said, which is more nuanced and more complex. But having said that, his hierarchy of needs is I think, deeply inaccurate in very, very important ways. I think these are the hierarchy of needs of separate self, actually.
Right.
Right. And so what we're going to try and do for the first time is we're going to try and articulate, right? We're going to really spend literally 3 weeks just talking about need. I mean, it's like crazy exciting to do. What do I need? And we're going to try and articulate 8 needs and what they are and how they work. And a kind of in the deepest way we know how, as best as we can do together.
Let me know.
But I just want to say one thing. There's nothing more holy than need. Right? Responding to genuine need is what holiness means. It's why a mother is so ecstatic about being a mother, right? Now, there's people like, well, why would you possibly want to be a mother? I was, by the way, a mother for about a day and a half when my firstborn, Rachel, was born, and her mother, actually, it was a whole story. She got sick, and whatever the story was, she had to rush her to the hospital. She was in the hospital for several days. So I was with this little newborn, Rachel. I barely survived, right? It was like, no breasts. What are we doing here? Right? It was like, I did not sleep for like 4 days, right? I couldn't, right? But it was also ecstatic, right? Because the experience of being so profoundly needed, right, is just an ecstatic experience. When I'm not needed, to not be needed is ultimate depression, right? The experience of depression is replaceability. Right? Depression is the ideology of depression is futility. If you look at the psychiatric literature, and futility means it's not just that there's nothing I can do, but that's kind of like a methodological futility, nothing for me to do. But there's an ontological futility, right? So the classical literature is kind of a pragmatic futility when you look at the ideology of depression. But there's an ontological futility. There's nothing to be done. There's no need that I can address. So literally the experience of not being able to address in a significant way a genuine need, right, is the source of all mental breakdown.
We need to be needed, or we need to need also, right?
We need, so it's like, so we're going to talk. So these 3 weeks, everybody, so I just want to invite everyone to come, right, is just, it's about need, right? It's a completely new conversation, right? It's not in the Unique Self book. Right, David, we're crazy excited to be having it together, right? Right, and so, and if I can, like, I really need you to come, right? Right?
We need you to come. We need it. We need it.
Right, Andrew, everybody, it was a crazy, crazy pleasure to be together.